So you remember billionaire Robert Smith? He was a brother that paid the tuition for all those brothers at Morehouse. It made a big news out there, when he done this. So he recently came out spoken about reparations. And he says he believed the private sector should invest billions into reparations for the black community. Now, he's the CEO of Vista Equity, and he made the suggestion during an interview with Reuters on August the 12th. He said that the companies that benefited from the transatlantic slave trade should invest in reparations for black Americans. I agree with him. Many of your banks and companies is in existence right now benefited from slavery. He said, I think it's going to be a political decision that's going to have to be made and decided upon. He said, but I think corporations have to also think about, well, what is the right thing to do? Now, he argued companies can bring their expertise and capital to repair the communities that they're directly associated with in the industries in which they cover. He said, I think this has to be very thoughtful approach. He said, but I think action needs to be taken. He said he also asserted that the coronavirus outbreak has allowed the world to slow down enough to pay attention to racial inequality. And he says it was the silence of the pandemic, he said, sheltering at home, that gave us all a chance to witness certain acts against the African-American community. He said the killing of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, he said Breonna Taylor in particular, those three, he said, this period the consciousness and humanity of Americans and people throughout the world, and saying this is just wrong and this is unjust and enough is enough, which is true. Now, he is the richest black person in America, and he also has a net worth of $5 billion. OK, now he suggested that corporations allocate 2% of their annual net income toward reparation payments. He said to the black community. He said he based his figure on data that found the average American household gives 2% of their income to charity. He says he also noted that the net income from the 10 largest banks in the United States within the past decade is $968 billion. He said 2% of that figure is $19.4 billion. He said that could help empower black Americans. He said nowhere is structural racism more apparent than in corporate America. And those of you who work in corporate America, you know he's not lying. I know he's not lying. So he said, if you think about structural racism and access to capital, 70% of African-American communities don't even have a branch or bank of any type. That's true. That's 100% true. And I'm with Robert Smith on this. This is a good approach. Chase Bank, you was involved in the slave trade. 2% can go to black people. Bank of America, you was involved in the slave trade. Wells Fargo, you was involved in the slave trade. Oh, we can keep naming a bunch of banks who's still in operation today that was involved with the slave trade. They would give mortgages. You know how you mortgage a house? They'll give mortgages for African slaves to these slave owners. Hey, we'll give you the money to buy these slaves. You pay your payments. You don't pay your payments, we come and repo your slave and then sell them back out in the auction. That's what they done to our people. So yes, the banks are very complicit and they are part of reparations. It's just not the American government. It's the banks as well. So it is a great idea that Robert Smith came up with. And that's something that we need to start pushing to. They say, hey, wait a minute. You corporations that was involved, you need to pay up too. But leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about the situation with our brother, Robert Smith. You know, speaking up about reparations, that's good. Listen, that energy right now is out here. And that energy is catching everybody up. Whether you're the richest man in America, the richest black man in America, Robert Smith, or if you down to the lowest of the low of us, or at least on the financial totem pole, that energy is spreading. And we going to get to the promised land that we need to be. Trust me on that. They're going to have to give it up.